Washington state feels like it's hiding something. Past the tourist trails of Mount Rainier, beyond the quiet shores of Puget Sound, beneath the canopy of ancient forests, there are stories that never make the evening news. Stories whispered between first responders. Stories that end careers. Stories that leave professionals refusing to return to places they once knew like the back of their hand. Lock your doors. Put on your headphones. Because after this video, Washington won't feel like just another Pacific Northwest paradise. The first thing you need to understand about Washington is how quickly normalcy can shatter. One moment you're walking a trail you've walked 100 times. The next, reality stops making sense. And when that happens, when the impossible becomes documented, authorities have a very specific response. Silence. Let me walk you through 5 events from 2024 that authorities either suppressed, downplayed, or refused to investigate. 5 cases where credible witnesses encountered phenomena that shouldn't exist. 5 mysteries that are still unfolding as we speak. The first mystery begins in North Cascades National Park, one of the most remote wilderness areas in the continental United States. March 2024. A park ranger named Michael Torres, 15 years of backcountry experience, disappeared during a routine patrol along the Cascade Pass Trail. His last radio transmission came in at 3:47 p.m. Weather clear. Trail conditions normal. He reported nothing unusual. By 4:15 p.m., his GPS signal vanished. Search and rescue teams found his backpack 3 days later, placed carefully on a rock formation 2 miles off trail, in terrain so steep that even experienced climbers avoid it. The backpack was dry, despite 3 days of rain. Inside, his radio, still powered on, battery at 87%. His water bottles, full. His emergency beacon, never activated. But here's what made no sense. Torres's boots were inside the backpack. Laces still tied, as if he'd simply stepped out of them without untying a single knot. Dr. Sarah Chen, a forensic specialist from the University of Washington, brought in to analyze the scene, described it in her preliminary report as inconsistent with any known pattern of distress or disorientation. A ranger doesn't remove his boots in steep terrain. He doesn't walk away from his emergency beacon. He doesn't leave his radio on while vanishing into conditions that would kill an unprepared hiker in hours. When reporters asked the National Park Service for clarification, they issued a single statement. Lost hiker, case closed, search suspended. But rangers who worked with Torres off the record told a different story. They described how in the weeks before his disappearance, he'd mentioned hearing rhythmic thumping sounds in areas where no machinery operated, sounds that seemed to move through the forest without a source. He'd reported it to his supervisor twice. Both times, he was told to focus on his patrol duties and stop speculating about acoustic anomalies. The last time anyone saw him, a fellow ranger said he looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. When asked why, Torres said only this: "The forest doesn't sleep anymore." Michael Torres was never found. His family filed a Freedom of Information request for the full search and rescue records. The request was denied, citing privacy concerns. But here's what's strange. In the 3 months following Torres's disappearance, 7 different hikers reported the same phenomenon along the Cascade Pass Trail. A rhythmic thumping sound, deep and resonant, moving through the trees without any visible source. All 7 filed incident reports with the Park Service. None of those reports appear in the public database. When you lose an experienced ranger under impossible circumstances, it raises questions. When you suppress witness reports documenting the same phenomenon he mentioned before vanishing, it stops being coincidence. It starts looking like a pattern someone doesn't want examined. The second mystery takes us south to Lake Chelan, Washington's 3rd deepest lake, where the water reaches depths of nearly 1,500 feet. In late May 2024, a sonar research team from the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory was conducting routine bathymetric surveys when their equipment detected something that shouldn't exist. The team was led by Dr. Marcus Holloway, a hydrologist with 22 years of experience in deep water acoustic imaging. At 11:23 a.m., while surveying a section of the lake near Staking. Their sonar array registered a solid object at a depth of 1,200 feet. The object measured approximately 400 feet in length, cylindrical, metallic, perfectly symmetrical. When Dr. Holloway adjusted the sonar frequency for higher resolution imaging, the object vanished from the screen. Not gradually, instantaneously. Here's what makes this impossible. Sonar doesn't lie. Objects don't vanish from acoustic detection unless they physically move faster than the speed of sound through water, which is roughly 3,300 miles per hour. Nothing natural moves that fast underwater. Nothing man-made moves that fast underwater. Yet, the sonar logs recorded the object present at 11:23:17 a.m. and absent at 11:23:19 a.m. 2 seconds, covering a distance that would require acceleration forces that would pulverize any known material. Dr. Holloway attempted to replicate the survey the following day. The object reappeared in the exact same location, at the exact same depth, for exactly 9 seconds before vanishing again. He submitted his findings to the National Laboratory with a request for a comprehensive deep water investigation. 3 days later, he received a terse email. Equipment malfunction, data unreliable, no further action required. His access to the sonar array was quietly revoked. When he asked why, he was told budget constraints had forced a reallocation of resources. But here's what the official explanation doesn't address. 2 recreational fishermen reported seeing something strange on their consumer-grade fish finders in the same area of Lake Chelan during the same week. Both described a large object moving vertically through the water column at speeds their equipment couldn't accurately track. One of them, a retired engineer named Robert Sanchez, calculated the vertical speed based on the timestamps from his fish finder. Minimum velocity, 200 feet per second. Faster than any known submarine. Faster than any marine animal. Faster than physics should allow for an object that size in water. Sanchez attempted to submit his fish finder data to local news outlets. None of them ran the story. He posted his findings to online forums dedicated to anomalous phenomena. Within 48 hours, his posts were removed for violating terms of service related to unsubstantiated claims. When the first reached out to Dr. Holloway for comment, he declined to speak on the record, saying only that he values his career. Here's the question no one wants to ask. If it's just equipment malfunction, why revoke access to a senior hydrologist with 2 decades of experience? If it's just recreational fishermen misreading their screens, why scrub their posts from the internet? And if there's nothing in Lake Chelan that defies explanation, why does the National Laboratory suddenly lack the budget to investigate the deepest, least explored section of one of Washington's most iconic lakes? The third mystery occurred in the Hanford Reach, a section of the Columbia River that flows through one of the most radioactively contaminated sites in the Western Hemisphere. For decades, Hanford was home to plutonium production reactors that supplied material for the Manhattan Project. The site is now a Superfund cleanup zone, restricted to authorized personnel only, monitored 24/7 by security and environmental sensors. In August 2024, those sensors detected something impossible. At 2:34 a.m. on August 17th, radiation monitors positioned along a 5-mile stretch of the river registered a sudden spike in gamma radiation levels, far exceeding background contamination. The spike lasted exactly 11 minutes, then dropped back to baseline as if nothing had happened. Automated emergency protocols triggered evacuation alerts for cleanup crews working night shifts in the area. But here's what makes no sense. Radiation doesn't spike and disappear. Gamma radiation comes from the decay of radioactive isotopes, a process governed by half-lives that range from seconds to millions of years. You don't get an 11-minute burst of gamma radiation without a source. And that source doesn't vanish. It decays, predictably, measurably, according to the laws of nuclear physics. Environmental engineer David Klein, who oversees monitoring operations at Hanford, described the event in an internal memo obtained through a FOIA request as inconsistent with any known contamination pattern. The memo noted that simultaneous spikes across multiple sensors ruled out equipment failure, It noted that the gamma signature didn't match any isotope inventory stored at the site. It noted that radiation levels returned to baseline too quickly for natural decay. And then it noted something even stranger. During those 11 minutes, every motion-activated security camera along that section of the river shut down. Not from power loss, the cameras were on. They simply stopped recording. When the footage was reviewed, there was an 11-minute gap in surveillance, perfectly aligned with the radiation spike. No mechanical failure, no power surge. The cameras just stopped recording, then resumed, as if someone had pressed pause. The report concluded with a single recommendation: further investigation required. That investigation never happened. 3 weeks later, David Klein was reassigned to a different project. When asked about the incident, he declined to comment, citing non-disclosure agreements related to national security. But security contractors working at Hanford aren't bound by the same NDAs. One of them, speaking anonymously to a local journalist, described what happened that night. He was positioned at a watchtower overlooking the section of river where the radiation spike occurred. At approximately 2:30 a.m., he saw lights in the water, not reflections. Lights beneath the surface, blue-white, moving upstream against the current. He estimated they were 50 to 70 feet below the surface. Too deep for divers. Too bright for bioluminescence. He radioed his supervisor. The supervisor told him to stay at his post and not approach the river. By the time the radiation alarm sounded 4 minutes later, the lights were gone. Here's what authorities won't explain. If the radiation spike was a false alarm, why reassign the engineer who documented it? If the camera shutdown was coincidence, why is there no maintenance report addressing the failure? And if a security contractor saw lights moving underwater in a restricted nuclear site minutes before a gamma radiation spike, why isn't there a full-scale investigation into potential sabotage or contamination? The fourth mystery brings us to the Olympic Peninsula, specifically the Hoh Rainforest, one of the largest temperate rainforests in the United States. October 2024. A group of environmental researchers from Oregon State University arrived to study mycorrhizal networks, the underground fungal systems that connect trees in a vast communication web. They set up monitoring equipment designed to measure electrical signals transmitted through root systems, a relatively new field of study documenting how forests share resources and information. On October 9th, at approximately 8:15 p.m., their equipment began recording electrical pulses unlike anything documented in scientific literature. Dr. Emily Torres, the lead researcher, described the pulses as rhythmic, repetitive, and far stronger than any naturally occurring root signal. The frequency was approximately 7.8 Hz, the same frequency as the Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic pulse of Earth's ionosphere. But the pulses weren't coming from the atmosphere. They were coming from beneath the forest floor. The pulses continued for 3 hours and 42 minutes. Dr. Torres and her team recorded over 200 minutes of data showing synchronized electrical activity across a network spanning roughly half a square mile. The activity was too organized to be random, too widespread to originate from a single source, and too powerful to be generated by fungal or root systems alone. When they analyzed the waveforms later, they found patterns, not random noise, patterns, repeating sequences with variations, as if the forest itself was transmitting information in a structured language. Here's what makes this genuinely strange. When Dr. Torres tried to replicate the measurements the following night, her equipment was confiscated by the National Park Service. No explanation, no warrant. A ranger simply arrived, informed her that her research permit had been suspended for violating protocol, and removed her monitoring equipment. When she asked which protocol she'd violated, the ranger said she'd been operating in a restricted research zone, but the coordinates she'd been assigned by the university were in an unrestricted area. When she pointed this out, the ranger said the boundaries had been updated. There was no public notice of any boundary change. Dr. Torres filed a formal complaint with the Park Service. Her complaint was denied, and her research permit was permanently revoked for insubordination. When Oregon State University inquired on her behalf, they were told that Dr. Torres had been conducting unauthorized research in a sensitive ecological area. The university, unwilling to jeopardize future research permits, quietly reassigned her to a different project. The 200 minutes of recorded data from the whole rainforest were never analyzed by an independent lab. When Dr. Torres tried to publish her preliminary findings, every journal she submitted to rejected the paper, citing insufficient peer review. But here's what she told me off the record. The night they recorded those pulses, something else happened. As the electrical activity intensified, every member of the research team began experiencing the same physical sensation. A low-frequency vibration they could feel in their chests, as if something beneath the forest floor was resonating through their bodies. One team member described it as the forest breathing it. Another said it felt like standing inside a speaker playing a note too low to hear but powerful enough to rattle your bones. When the pulses stopped at 11:57 p.m., the vibration ceased immediately. The forest went silent in a way that felt unnatural, as if every insect, every bird, every nocturnal animal had collectively stopped making sound. When a forest transmits electrical signals in patterns too organized to be natural, you pay attention. When authorities confiscate the data and revoke the researcher's permit without cause, you start wondering what they're trying to hide. And when every living thing in a half-square-mile area goes silent the moment the phenomenon ends, you realize you're not dealing with normal biology. You're dealing with something that knows when it's being watched. The fifth and final mystery takes us back to North Cascades National Park. But this time, the phenomenon isn't isolated to a single ranger. In November 2024, 7 hikers across 3 separate trails reported the same experience. They entered the forest in daylight, followed marked trails, carried GPS devices, and somehow emerged hours later than their GPS logs indicated. Not minutes, hours. The first case involved 2 experienced backpackers, Jennifer and Mark Callahan, hiking the Thornton Lakes Trail. They started at 9:00 a.m., documented by the trailhead sign-in log. The trail is a 10-40-mile round trip, typically completed in 6 to 7 hours. Their GPS devices track their movements along the trail continuously. They reached the lake at 12:30 p.m., took a lunch break, started their return hike at 1:15 p.m., and emerged at the trailhead at 7:45 p.m. Total elapsed time, 10 hours and 45 minutes. But here's the problem. When they synced their GPS logs to their laptop, the devices showed only 6 hours and 20 minutes of recorded movement. Not a gap in tracking, not missing data. The GPS had recorded every step, every elevation change, every switchback. The devices showed they arrived back at the trailhead at 3:35 p.m. But the trailhead camera, which photographs every hiker exiting the park, timestamped their departure at 7:47 p.m. 4 hours and 12 minutes are unaccounted for, not by their memory, by the technology itself. Jennifer and Mark assumed it was a GPS malfunction until they saw a post online from another hiker describing the exact same experience on the Hidden Lake Trail. Then another post from the Maple Pass Loop. Then 2 more from the Cascade Pass Trail, the same trail where Ranger Michael Torres vanished 7 months earlier. All reported the same phenomenon. GPS devices showing significantly less elapsed time than clocks and cameras documented. All reported something else. A feeling of disorientation during the hike, as if they'd walked through sections of trail they didn't remember entering, as if time itself had skipped forward without their awareness. When a park ranger was asked about these reports during a community meeting in November, his response was telling. GPS satellites can experience signal degradation in steep terrain, which is true, but signal degradation causes tracking errors, gaps in data, incorrect positioning. It doesn't cause devices to record 6 hours of accurate movement when 10 hours have passed. It doesn't cause synchronized reports across multiple trails describing the same temporal discrepancy. And it doesn't explain why every single hiker who reported this phenomenon also described a specific sensory experience, a low hum, almost below the threshold of hearing, that seemed to come from the ground itself. Jennifer Callahan described it as the sound you feel more than hear, like standing near a generator buried underground. Another hiker said it reminded him of the way air pressure changes before a thunderstorm. But the sky was clear. A third hiker, a geologist, noted that the sensation intensified near areas where the trail passed over exposed bedrock, as if the rock itself was vibrating at a frequency just outside human perception. All of them said the same thing. When the hum stopped, they realized hours had passed. The National Park Service issued a statement attributing the reports to altitude-induced disorientation and equipment malfunction. But altitude sickness doesn't cause GPS devices to lose 4 hours of data while continuing to track position accurately. Equipment malfunction doesn't affect 7 independent devices in the same way across 3 different trails. And disorientation doesn't produce identical sensory descriptions from witnesses who have never met. Here's what doesn't make the official reports. In the 2 weeks following these incidents, the National Park Service quietly installed new electromagnetic monitoring equipment along all 5 trails where temporal discrepancies were reported. The equipment wasn't listed in any public project database. Contractors who installed the sensors were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. When local reporters asked what the sensors were monitoring, they were told it was a standard environmental assessment related to wildlife migration. But electromagnetic sensors don't track wildlife. They track electromagnetic fields, radiation, and frequency anomalies. They track phenomena that interfere with electronics. Phenomena like whatever caused 7 GPS devices to lose hours of recorded time while still functioning perfectly. 5 mysteries. 5 cases where credible witnesses, experienced professionals, and calibrated equipment all documented phenomena that shouldn't exist. A ranger vanishing after reporting sounds that move through the forest. A 400-foot metallic object appearing and disappearing from sonar detection in 2 seconds. An 11-minute gamma radiation spike in a nuclear site that shuts down cameras and leaves no decay signature. A forest transmitting electrical pulses in patterns organized enough to resemble language. And hikers losing hours of time while their GPS devices record accurate movement through a space where physics seems to bend. None of these cases have been investigated fully. None of them have official explanations that address the documented evidence. And all of them have been suppressed, downplayed, or dismissed by authorities who seem far more interested in controlling information than uncovering truth. Washington State in 2024 isn't experiencing folklore. It's experiencing phenomena that defy every framework we use to understand reality. And the people in charge of investigating these phenomena seem determined to ensure you never find out what's really happening. Some mysteries wait decades before surfacing. These are happening now, documented in real time, witnessed by people whose careers depend on credibility. If you've made it this far, thank you. Leave a like if any of these stories unsettled you. Tell us in the comments if you've experienced anything similar in the Pacific Northwest. And remember, some places don't just hide secrets. They rewrite the rules of what's possible.